Morning, all. All right, starting with something a little different today before the hockey gets started. It is an all-day hockey day yet again. And I watch all the hockey, and one of the reasons I watch all the hockey is the power rankings. So watching every game, I can go, all right, this team played well, this team didn't play well, or this team played well, didn't get a result. This team didn't necessarily play well, but they got a result. But every Saturday, it feels like there's an increasing number of people who may not, and maybe they don't care, but I'm going to go through how I do the power rankings because I get the feeling there are some who may not understand how I do this. And one conversation I had yesterday, I was like, all right, people just don't get it. First off, I don't care where anybody is in the standings. That's not what power rankings are supposed to be. And one of the reasons I started doing my own power rankings was because I would watch as other media would post a power rankings and you'd see a team go 0-3 that week and move up. And I'm like, well, wait, why did they move up? And they're like, we anticipate they're going to have a good week because. And I'm like, but they're not playing well right now, or vice versa. I would watch a team play really well and go, I wonder what's going to happen on the power rankings. They didn't move. And so I understand why there's people who get disappointed with my power rankings. From a similar perspective, I totally get that. But I want to go through how I decide who moves up, who moves down, and when. So the first thing is if it's a regulation win over a top team. So if you have a regulation win against Vegas, against Winnipeg, against Washington, teams that are up near or at the top, it's going to get more attention and it's going to get more movement than a game that you win against San Jose or against Chicago. That just makes sense. Not all wins are equal, and that's something that I keep in mind when I'm doing updates at the end of every single day. And it's part of the reason why I do them every single day, because then those games are fresh in my mind, and I'm like, this team needs to move up, this team needs to move down. Yesterday, for instance, I moved New Jersey down by a few different spots. They moved down significantly because it feels like there's a pattern with them right now. They're in a bit of a funk, and yeah, so I felt like there needed to be a bit of a correction there. So a regulation win over a good team is right underneath a win over a top team. So that'd be like a playoff level team, a team that may not be one of the top teams, but that's going to get pretty good consideration too. And then if it's an overtime or a shootout win, it gets less of a bump than it does if it's a regulation win. Regulation win, that's 5-on-5. An overtime win is 3-on-3, which we don't get in the playoffs, and 3-on-3 hockey is seen as kind of a coin toss. And then there's the shootout, which is just it's a display of shooting and saves, and it's a breakaway contest. And so I don't feel like, oh, this team deserves to move up because they won the breakaway contest tonight. Now there are times where that can happen. So if it's against Vegas, you go into Las Vegas and you win in a shootout, you still got Vegas through 65 minutes and you didn't lose. So that gets some consideration from me there. And then obviously the good team is underneath the top team. So again, overtime shootout win. And it's more impressive if you do it on the road than if you do it at home. And so that's something I take into consideration as well when I'm doing the update. A regulation win over a mediocre team, which is teams that are, a little bit below or, not at the bottom. Teams not at the bottom. Those get taken into consideration too. January usually sees surprises. January we always have, it's called the dog days of the season for a reason. There are teams that definitely play down to other teams during January or just don't get up for the games as much. And I know it's an 82-game schedule. It's understandable that it is difficult for a team to, bring that number one 100% effort every single night with the travel in the league and the schedule being as it is. So January, you will usually see more in the way of surprises, and a team that's been hot all season all of a sudden goes ice cold, and vice versa. A team that's been ice cold all season suddenly heats it up. Now, how a team wins is important. And when I'm doing the power rankings, it's something that, again, on that day-to-day when I'm doing the updates, I take care of is, did they play a full 60 minutes? It's a cliche, but it's true. Did they give that same effort the whole game? If they didn't, was there an extenuating circumstance? Was there an injury to a top player? That is totally understandable. The players are a little bit, not as focused as they would have otherwise been. Were they ahead 7-1? So in the third period, they didn't play very well. They allowed 3 goals. It became 7-4. I don't care about that not being a full 60 minutes because they were up 7-1 and they had a bit of a lapse in the third. I don't see that as a big deal. Do they rely on comebacks? One of the reasons I keep an eye on that too is that, let's say, for instance, okay, so looking at the board today, Colorado's playing Minnesota. Let's just say that Colorado's down 3-0 in the third and they come back and they win 4-3. That's impressive. But is that a more impressive result? Or let's just say Utah playing against Winnipeg. Utah beats Winnipeg 4-0 and Winnipeg gets 18 shots. So, which of those two results is more impressive? Which team played better that day? My money would be on Utah because they got the shutout. They only allowed 18 shots. Yes, Colorado won, but they relied on that comeback. So that's where I might make that decision on, okay, this team will move here. This team won't because of that reason, right? And then is the team racking up losses in extra time? One thing that I don't generally do, because I talked about it a bit here, but if a team is getting losses in overtime and shootouts, I don't generally move them up. I don't generally do that, and I do treat shootouts like ties. Sometimes a tie is impressive. Say, for instance, San Jose goes into Las Vegas and gets, a loss, because that's kind of what San Jose does against Vegas, but it gets to a shootout. Depending on what's going on with the other teams around San Jose on that power rankings, I might be like, you know what? I'm going to move San Jose up. They got that one all the way to a shootout. I think they deserve to get bumped up at least a little bit, considering where they are on the board, which the power rankings this week was last, right? So that's something that I keep in mind. And I don't reward or punish over injuries. So I've seen that of, hey, our team got a win, and, we're short a lot of players. We should get more consideration. I don't worry about the injuries. And one of the reasons why is that before I started my own power rankings, I would get really frustrated when I would see a team drop in the power rankings. When they'd had a good week, maybe they'd won 2 out of 3, but the power rankings would be, we've dropped this team because a top player is out. But they haven't lost yet without that player. We haven't seen how they're going to play yet without that player. Power rankings on some level are supposed to be somewhat predictive, somewhat telling you which teams are playing really well right now. And there's always going to be that subjectivity. There is no objective truth when it comes to a power rankings. Other people do it differently. And the way that I do it, where I update it every day, is because when I did try doing just the weekly updates, it was a nightmare. Where I'm like, well, this team beat this team, but wait a minute, that game and this one, it became an absolute nightmare because I could argue almost any team over any other that was in the same spot. And that happens. There have been nights where I've called, usually I'll just call Yvonne in here and I'll show her the power rankings and I'll go, all right, so teams 10 through 13 all won today. Does team number 9 now belong in team, like, if 10, 11, 12, 13 win, and if they're all good games, does that mean the team that was in 9th place that maybe didn't even play that night is now 13th? And I don't do that. The way I used to do the power rankings back when I started doing them was, if you won in regulation, you moved up 2 spots. If you won in overtime or a shootout, it was 1 spot, and vice versa. You dropped 1 spot if you lost in overtime or shootout, and you dropped 2 spots if you lost in regulation. And it was chaos. It was absolute chaos, and I was trying to keep my opinion out of it, but I realized that didn't work. And it is something that I am still in the process of figuring out when it comes to the player power rankings, where I'm trying to keep my opinion out of it, where I'm like, all right, the math tells me this is where this player belongs, rather than just saying, I think this is the best player right now. Because I do understand that some of the analytics are going to tell us things that we don't necessarily pay that much attention to during the game that may very well tell us certain players are playing really well that we're not noticing, and vice versa. A player that we think's playing really well, maybe they're having problems with their defensive game, maybe there's other issues with their game that drags them down a little bit. So, at any rate, I'm still figuring out the balance there. I really do think that the way I do the power rankings works for me the best. This is the way that works for me. And I understand that it throws people off seeing like Montreal in the top row, because Montreal's playing really well and they've beaten some top teams. I resisted moving Montreal up for a while when they started winning. But once they started beating Vegas, Florida, Tampa, I was like, okay, so they have to move up, and they have to move up a lot, because these are teams that other teams aren't beating, especially consecutively. So that's why Montreal's as high up as they are. And I do not care where they are in the standings. I don't care where anybody is in the standings, because even if you're 3 weeks before the end of the season, if a team that's outside the playoff picture is playing really, really, really well, then the power rankings should reflect that. They should reflect that, yes, this team may not be in the playoffs, because that's what the standings are for, but they're playing really well right now. One team that was a really good example of that was the Arizona Coyotes. I want to say in 2019, they went on a run at the end of the season. They ended up in the top 16 by the end of the year because they were just playing really well. But it has happened before. I will not be surprised if at the end of this season, the power rankings show a team that missed the playoffs in the top 16. Some teams don't play all that well going into the playoffs, and some teams play extremely well going into the playoffs, and some teams play extremely well once they're eliminated from the playoffs. It's a joke I used to make about the Vancouver Canucks, where they'd get mathematically eliminated from the playoffs, and then they start winning. I'm like, see, the pressure's off. That's all I had to do. Just tell them they're not going to make the playoffs, and they play so much better. And I mean, I'm talking, and that had been about 20 years ago that I made that joke. But at any rate, and it's not the first time I had made that joke either. But that's the reason why I'm wearing my Jekyll and Hyde jersey, because, and I'll just show you guys, it does say Jekyll and Hyde on the back, is because it really can be kind of a Jekyll and Hyde thing when you're doing power rankings. And there is subjectivity to it. There absolutely is. And that's part of the reason why every day I go, all right, I'm going to watch all the hockey. Because I want to do my best in watching all these games, reviewing all these games, even on days where I know those reviews are not going to generate a lot of views. I'm going to do them because I know that once the days come to an end, that I've watched that hockey, I've taken in that information, and I've updated the power rankings to the best of my ability. So it is something that I do at this point. There's going to be a point in time in my life where I say, I don't think I need to watch all these games, and then I'd have to change the way I did the power rankings. But at this point in time, it's a system that I feel like works the best for me. And I feel like it's as fair as it can be. And the fact that teams that I root for, none of them have been first this year. I don't think Dallas has been first at all. I know Boston and Vancouver haven't been anywhere near first. So I feel like that has to show some amount of fairness to it. And I don't put any opinion into it beyond this team played well or this team didn't play well. It's not like I'm going to be like, well, I'm not going to move that team up because they hurt my feelings. That's not ever, because then it'd be like, this weekend 32 is every team that's ever beaten the Canucks. They don't fit on the puck board, so it's everybody, and number one's Vancouver. Good night, everybody. Like, it's just not a thing. I can't. I can't do that. I feel like it would sort of betray what it all is. And the funny part too is that there have been times where I've looked at the power rankings board and gone, the hell's that team doing there? That doesn't, what was I thinking? And then I look at the NHL app and I look at their recent schedule and I go, yeah, that works. And sometimes it's that they're really good, they're playing really well, or sometimes they're just not playing well. And I'm like, yeah, that's it. There are times where people mention the power rankings, I'm like, you know what? They might have a point. And then I look and I go, yeah, no, I remember why I busted them down. I remember why I moved that team up. And so there it is. And I used to do those videos too, where I would say, this is why this team dropped this week, or this is why this team went up. And honestly, if this was all about, because I see too, like, oh, this team's in this spot for the clicks. What? It's a power rankings. People are going to watch it. They're not going to show up just because a team's in the top row or the bottom row. But if I was really, if you want to go cynical with this and say, he just does it for the views, then every week I would do a video on, this is why this team dropped, this is why this team went up. I'd call it the Power Rankings Spotlight, and I would do it every Monday. So I have no intention of ever doing that, because then it really does look like, I'm using the power rankings then to generate something else down the road, and it wouldn't feel right. I wouldn't want to do that. So, yeah. Anyways, there you go. I know this won't convince anybody who doesn't like the way I do my power rankings, but it just feels like lately there's been a lot of people that I don't think understand. They may very well be new to the channel. Maybe they knew before and they've kind of forgotten, or they're just mad about where their team is. But yeah, there you go. Play a full 60 minutes, rely on comebacks, rack up OTL, SOL points. I keep an eye on that kind of thing. But it really is basically you win over good teams, you move up. If you win over bad teams, big thumbs up. I go, yep, good job. If during a week, let's just say the Vegas during a week, they beat San Jose, Anaheim, and then they go to Chicago and beat Chicago, I'd be like, yeah, we expected those 3 wins. Good on you for keeping it up. All right. They're in the right spot on the power rankings. And there are days where I do that too, where at the end of the night, I look at all the results, I look at the board, and I go, that's still accurate. I still think nothing happened tonight to tell me that any of these teams move up or down. I understand why that would be concerning and frustrating to some, but there you go. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. People always do. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe in the event you may not have done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support as always. It is a full day of hockey today, but I'll try to get videos in where I can. It's one thing with it being a 9-game schedule, but they're all kind of spread out, so I shall do my best. Thank you guys so much for all your support. It is greatly appreciated. I will talk to you again soon.